You're listening to The Lyndia Grant Show. Think on these things with Lyndia Grant.
Well, good evening, Radio 1 listeners. Thank you for tuning in to The Lyndia Grant Show here on Spirit 1340 WYCB, the oldest gospel radio station in Washington, D.C., and the first contemporary gospel outlet in the United States. Today is Friday, October the 20th, 2023. Our show is heard throughout the DMV every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can also listen to us on your phone or your computer. Just click Spirit 1340, listen live. My guests today are attorney Dana Stebbins from the Dana Stebbins Law Firm. Formerly, she was with Wilkes Artist Law Firm, and she worked for members of Congress and a multiplicity of positions that enhanced her knowledge base. She's going to be talking about the assault on democracy from within and without. But first, we're going to hear from Dr. Julianne Malveaux, our weekly commentator, who talks about politics and the economy. Just a little bit about Dr. Malveaux. I saw her on Facebook down at Bennett College, so I was excited to see that. That was wonderful. She is a former president, and she's also emeritus from Bennett College, and also she was a dean at Cal State Los Angeles. She in the ethnic studies, and so I wanted to just go ahead and get her started. She also is the head of president of Reverend Jesse Jackson's Push Excel, the youth organization. How are you today, Dr. Julianne?
I am great, thank you.
All right, well, I'm doing wonderful, thank you. Let's talk because between you and Dana, the people really got a lot to hear this week. What you got to tell us?
Well, we've got, on Saturday, Hamas, the horrible assault on Israel, dropping bombs. No, they weren't dropping bombs. It was really more of a ground war. But Hamas is really they are angry, and they've attacked Israel, and of course Israel is going to fight back. It's very interesting, however, Lyndia. I mean, we can understand why Hamas is so angry. It keeps eating up their land. They will not give an inch. They said Tom Friedman, the New York Times economist, put it very well. He said Israel wants to have its cake. That's Arab acceptance. So they're just negotiating some acceptance with Saudi Arabia, but they also want to eat Palestinian land. And I believe that Hamas was probably enraged by the fact that the peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia does not include any concessions for them. And I believe that that's the source of this anger, the source of what's going on. And so we have to just look at that. But, of course, killing babies. Now, what we're understanding is that some of these reports have been exaggerated. I heard one report that 40 babies were killed, and another one said, no, it was one. You shouldn't kill any babies. You shouldn't kill any babies.
No.
But at the same time, the exaggeration has basically attempted to come off inhumane. They've used words like barbarians, inhuman, savages, to say that they shot innocent people. And, of course, Israel had over 1,200 losses of life. There's still perhaps as many as 100 people being held hostage, and there may be as many as 20 Americans being held hostage. And Hamas seems to have moved these hostages around in such a way that if Israel fights back, they may kill some of the hostages themselves. So it's a very ugly situation, to say the least, a very ugly situation. And, of course, Israel has fought back. Now Hamas has probably lost about nearly 1,000 people, 900 plus, depending on which report you hear. So you basically have a very unstable situation in an unstable Middle East, with Israel unwilling to do anything to provide peace with the Palestinians heretofore, which I believe is why Hamas basically went off. And that's what they did. They went off. It was people are comparing it to the Holocaust. People are saying that the amount of losses, if it happened in the United States, based on population, we look like we had lost 30,000 people. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
At the same time, I have to be clear. When I heard some of these words, Well, you know, my research right now is on lynching, and I'm working on a book on lynching, the wealth gap, and reparations. So when I hear words like barbarous, inhuman, and savagery, I think of enslavement and its aftermath. And while people are clamoring that there have to be statements, people have to do this, people have to do that, what have they ever had to do with black people or with enslavement? It took until 2017, I believe, 2016, to pass the anti-lynching law. Mm-hmm. They, for years, since the first lynching, people tried to get the NAACP, others tried to get anti-lynching law passed. Now, we couldn't pass it until after lynching had just about finished. So when we talk about humanity, we have to put it in context. I'm wondering if Hamas learned from white slaveholders how to be barbarous. I'm just wondering if that's what happened. And I just have to say that I know a lot of people, and I too have much sympathy for what's happening now, just in general. I know a lot of people will support Israel first and never look at the other side. And I think we do have to look at the other side. President Biden has said he stands with Israel. We stand with Israel. Okay. But when have we stood with other kinds of inhumanity that we've seen in our world? I just want to say that. So in any case, it's a mess. It's going to be a mess. There doesn't seem to be anyone who can get these folks peace, and that's going to be a problem. And Netanyahu has said they will wipe Hamas out. Now, how many innocent people, they talk about innocent people, how many innocent people have to die for them to wipe Hamas out? That's a huge question that we have to look at. We also have to look at the global ramifications, economic ramifications of this, because we already have, money with Ukraine. Now are we going to have more money with this? We are already sending weapons. Is this going to have any kind of impact on the U.S. economy? So far, no, but we're only 5 days in. Let's see what happens in the next week or so, and whether or not Congress or others are going to be pressured to send money or, frankly, to send troops. Now, speaking of Congress, they don't have a speaker. Until they have a speaker, they can't pass any legislation, not about Israel, not about anything else. Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise are Jordan, Ohio, Scalise, Louisiana, are basically the two declared candidates for the speakership. And on Tuesday evening, they had a 2-hour meeting. The Republican caucus had a 2-hour meeting to try to figure out which one they want to support. Either one of them is going to have a hard time getting to the 217 votes that are needed to declare a speaker. So if Congress was going to do anything about Israel, they can't do anything now until, of course, they find a speaker. They're trying to change the rules. I'm just laughing at the Republican function, but unfortunately that dysfunction now affects all of us. But I'm still laughing at their dysfunction and some of the nonsense that's going on. We end up basically seeing the rest of they don't come back until next week.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What happens? Seeing what happens. So there we have it. Kevin McCarthy, many people want him back. They're looking at their choices. They want him back. He says he will not be nominated. He's not in it. He has also thought about leaving Congress, leaving soon. So we'll see what happens with that. Speaking of Congress, George Santos, the beleaguered Republican congressman from New York who lied about everything, his religion, his job, his money, has now got caught in another lie. This one might land him in jail, credit card fraud. People gave him money using their credit cards, as people often do with political contributions, church contributions, everything else. He used some of those credit cards for himself.
Oh,
he used other people's credit cards for himself, and so he now has. He doesn't have to go to court until later this month, but he already was going to court, and now they've added this additional charge on him. It would be funny if it wasn't so pitiful, but it is pitiful. But he's pitiful, and it's a wonder that they haven't expelled him from Congress already, which they should do. Last week was Banned Book Week in the United States, for the American Library Association annually has banned Book Week because, as you know, and it's gotten worse, we have got a crisis in literacy where people do not want certain books in the libraries. They don't want them in the schools. Now they don't want them in the libraries. So you want to regulate what children are reading, but now you want to also regulate what adults are reading, grown people, by saying these books don't belong in the libraries. Last year, complaints of libraries was about 16% of complaints had to do with specific books. This year, 49% of complaints, nearly half. So far this year, it's only October. By the time we get to the end of the year, it's likely to be 55% or more. Asking that libraries get rid of certain books, among them The Color Purple, which is, about to be a movie. Again, about among that, anything that says gay in it is often subject to be banned. And there are a number of other things that are subject to being banned, but in any case, this culture war in the United States is probably as intense without the violence of the war in between Hamas and Israel. I mean, people are really trying to find other people's business regarding literacy, and it makes no sense at all. Now, we called this month, 2 years ago, it was called Striketober. And early this week, workers at Walgreens walked out. They said that they were working under unsafe conditions. It hasn't affected us in the DMV, but the states where the Walgreens employees have walked are Oregon, Washington State, Massachusetts, and Arizona. I believe that if Walgreens doesn't address this issue of safety, we'll see it come here to the DMV. Workers are fighting back. Workers are not happy with the way they're being treated. We also have the Kaiser Permanente employees, especially nurses, who went out for 3 days asking for better working conditions as well as pay. They didn't strike permanently. They went out for 3 days. It was very inconvenient. Many patients were affected. But they say they'll go out again if management does not talk to them. So workers are really organizing, and it's really, really about time, quite frankly. Wouldn't you say, Lyndia?
Yes, I would. All right. Well, we thank you, Dr. Julian. I tell you, we run out of time talking to you with so much happening. You got a lot in, though. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're going to go to a commercial break, and when we return, we will be talking to our second guest, Attorney Dana Stebbins. Back in a moment.
If it wasn't for my care coach at AmeriHealth, I probably wouldn't be so healthy right now. As a man, we don't get checkups or see a doctor regularly anyways. It's probably just a man thing because none of my partners go either. We know we should, but we just don't, and hope it works out.
So what changed for you?
AmeriHealth assigned me a care coach, somebody that gives one-on-one help, answer questions, explain things, and help set my appointments. She also helped me understand what having high blood pressure really means and ways to manage it so it doesn't kill me. It ain't nothing to play with. If you're a member of AmeriHealth, ask for a care coach. I'm glad I got mine.
At AmeriHealth, if you need a care coach, you can have one. Just call us at 1-877-759-6224 to get connected. 1-877-759-6224. This program is funded in part by the government of the District of Columbia Department of Healthcare Finance. Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Washington and former religion columnist Lyndia Grant.
Who Moved My Cheese is a book about two types of people, those who accept change quickly and move on, and those who hem and haw and try to figure things out. They didn't see change coming and waste valuable time trying to figure out what happened. How did this happen to me? Let's call this group procrastinators. The lesson inside the cheese story is simple. Life is change. Brother said it best when he said, if I accept you as you are, I will make you worse. However, if I treat you as though you are what you're capable of becoming, I help you become that. We must change and keep moving. The Bible tells us to seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open unto you, ask and it shall be given.
Read more in the religion column of the Washington Informer, an award-winning African-American newspaper. We don't report crime or gossip, just positive news. Pick up the Washington Informer or visit us online at WashingtonInformer.com. Call 202-561-4100 for more information.
This is Frank Smith with the African American Civil War Museum in Washington, D.C., located at 1925 Vermont Avenue Northwest on the Green Line. Did you know that a recent study found that children who visit museums do better in school and in life than children who do not? So parents, teachers, and preachers, let's get moving. I promise you, if you bring your children to the African American Civil War Museum, they will be inspired by the images that they see. They will be impressed by our living history reenactors who are always available, and they will be involved in our scavenger hunt that takes them throughout our exhibit. That's the African American Civil War Museum, 1925 Vermont Avenue. Our hours are 10 to 6:30 on weekdays, 12 to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. See it, be inspired.
And we are back. Now we're going on to our second guest, Attorney Dana Stebbins, a new regular that's going to be coming on here every week, every month. And we're going to be talking about what's going on with our past president and what's going on in our country. And in particular, this week, she's going to be talking about an assault on our democracy. And she's talking about that thing from inside and out. So I want to say hi to Dana Stebbins, Attorney Dana Stebbins again, and get right started. How are you, Dana?
I'm well, Lyndia. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Well, you said you're concerned about the state of our democracy, Attorney Stebbins. Tell us why.
Well, let me start with a quick review. You remember when you and I were in school, we took civics, where we learned the government and the branches of government and what every branch is supposed to do. We also learned about what democracy is. Yes. They haven't taught civics for some time now, but I'm going to do a quick review just so that I can put this in context. Democracy is a government that's governed by the people. It's ruled by the majority. And it's ruled through voting. But we're also a republic in the United States. And a republic is a government in which citizens elect representatives to govern them. So we don't, vote on the laws directly ourselves. We elect people to vote on the laws to govern us. So we are a democracy and a republic. But the power still lies in the people. Okay. Now, so why I'm concerned is because there has been a consistent movement to lessen the power of the people and concentrate the power in a small group of people.
Exactly.
Okay? And that is getting worse and worse by all of the things they're doing to suppress the vote, to change voting districts. We're headed towards an authoritarian or autocracy type of government where our leaders are now not really listening to us. They're doing what they want to do. They are being slaves to their own ideologies and not servants of the people. And that scares me.
Okay. All right. So can you compare this to the January 6th insurrection? Is that an example of an assault from within? Because you talk about within and without.
It is. So let me do this in context too. There was an article way back in 2009 when Barack Obama was elected president that talked about the need to change the process so that would never happen again, meaning an African American would never be elected president again. There were statements like from Rush Limbaugh that said, I hope he fails, from right-wing organizations like Breitbart that talked about how we could not trust the government anymore because it was being led by this person. Mitch McConnell went so far as to say that the primary goal of the GOP was to prevent him from being reelected. That was way back in 2009.
Right.
In 2018, there was a report to try to see whether or not that kind of movement had taken hold, and it was done by a company called Freedom House. And Freedom House determined that there is a consistent effort ongoing to disrupt and undermine the American democracy.
Wow.
And it ended with the January 6th insurrection. What it did was generate a a social media campaign on the part of the right wing to tell people that our election had been stolen, that you can't count on the government anymore to do the right thing, that it's up to us, that small group of people, to take over and stop what was going on. So January 6th was a culmination of a long campaign to try to get people to distrust the democratic process and distrust our elected leaders, largely because of the people that we had elected that they didn't like. Mm-hmm. So yes, January was an assault from inside because it wasn't a foreign country that was doing this. It was people inside the government and outside the government, private citizens, who determined that their judgment was better and more worthy than the judgment of the American people who had elected Biden as president. And
so you're saying this really started with President Obama because he was African American, and am I right by saying, and it continued even more after Vice President Kamala Harris?
Well, I'm certain that did not make them happy, and I'm sure that none of them would admit to the fact that race was a factor in it. But it was race, and it was the tone that the country was going towards. It was acknowledging that people of color and disenfranchised people and people in the South, white people who had been abused and didn't have good jobs, that was what our country should be fighting for, that the democratic process was meant for them as well as the rich and the wealthy who thought they should control. So it wasn't just race, but race had a lot to do with it. It's just that some people believe that some of us do not deserve to have a say in the decisions that our government makes. Mm-hmm. Okay, and now it has continued to the point, Lyndia, where efforts to undermine our democracy has spread to states across the United States. For example, let me just give you a few things. There's now an effort to defund the special counsel Jack Smith and halt his investigation and prosecution of Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. In Georgia, lawmakers have moved to reprimand Fani Willis, the prosecutor who is trying Trump on a RICO prosecution charge. They called her a rogue prosecutor, and they want to reprimand her. California just passed legislation requiring independent persons to draw voting districts instead of the elected legislators because they don't like the districts that have given power to people of color. Voter suppression is spreading everywhere, where they are moving to control the entire election process, including vote counting. Then there's chaos in Congress. We have no speaker. We have no budget. And the chaos is because people are more intent on getting their personal agendas done than on serving the people. And then I got to just talk about the 300 military appointments that one person is holding up because he doesn't believe people in the military should have access to abortion. So we have large gaps in the military now because we don't have leaders that have been confirmed. And then finally, book banning. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that we now back in this country are banning books for our children to read because it says things that we don't want them to hear about slavery or other things in the United States? All of that is undemocratic. All of that is thwarting and assaulting our democracy on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. This is something that I'm happy that you're sharing with listeners, because we hear it, but we don't hear anybody say it so succinctly the way you just did to help us to see how this assault is taking place. Yes. So that when we go to vote, we don't know what's going to happen to our vote.
No, we don't. And it's so scary because members of the defeated party who were defeated last time are continuing the big lie that the election was stolen and that therefore everywhere across the United States people should take back the election process so that they would have trust in the election process. But how are you going to do that when you are denying people the right to vote on a daily basis and you're undermining and disrupting the process?
And so
okay,
we don't know
scary.
what's going to happen when it comes time for our next election, our big national election.
No, we don't. We don't, because
so they're setting things up.
That's correct. And if they can control the vote counters and those people who are electoral officials, then they believe they can control the outcome of the election. And this is all within. I haven't even talked about, which is why I'm glad you said this conversation might have to go on, the assault on democracy from outside, from countries like China and Russia.
That's right.
Right? So we have to spend some time talking about that. But this is what I want your listeners to know is this is happening inside of the United States of America, which is supposed to be the beacon of democracy for the rest of the world. I want people to be vigilant about this.
Well, I thank you for coming on and telling us about this. And we're going to have Attorney Stebbins back on again in November, and we're going to have her on for 2 weeks. I couldn't put her in for 2 weeks because I'd already booked someone for next week. But in November, I have 2 weeks available that we're going to talk about this for 2 weeks because it's so important that all of you out there in Radio Land understand. And once we post the show, we want you all to share it. We hear a lot on TV, but we're not going to hear it like we're hearing it from Attorney Dana Stebbins, and we thank you for that, Dana.
You're welcome, and I hope your listeners will buy into the notion that we all are responsible for saving our democracy. It's not just the job of one person; it's our job.
And give them any other closing statements you want to give, Dana, before we close this segment.
No, I just thank you for the opportunity because we don't get often a chance to have this dialogue amongst ourselves, and I appreciate the opportunity, Lyndia. Okay. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, we'll see you again next month, and thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I close with this. Earl Nightingale once said, "Words, thoughts, and deeds have a boomerang effect, so be careful what you send out. We do become what we think about, and Scripture says, my people perish for the lack of knowledge." So think on these things. From the Lyndia Grant Show, I'm your host, Lyndia Grant. Until next week, good day.
Hello, I am Mayor Christina A. Cross from the city of Glenarden, Maryland, the city on the move, where my motto is moving the mission forward. It is my pleasure to invite you all out to the Women's Day at the All Nations Baptist Church, which is located at number 2 Rhode Island Avenue, Northeast Washington, D.C., where the pastor is the Reverend Dr. James Coleman. It is this Sunday, October the 15th at 2023, beginning at 10 a.m. There will be good singing. We will honor women from the community for giving of their time and their talent. Each will receive a community service certificate, and I, Christina A. Cross, will be the guest speaker. I am grateful for the opportunity to serve and to edify our community and bring forth programming that builds unity in this community. We thank you so much for your attention to this public service announcement, and we hope to see you this Sunday, October 15th, 10 a.m. at the All Nations Baptist Church, located at number 2 Rhode Island Avenue, Northeast Washington, D.C.
Thank you for listening to The Lyndia Grant Show. Think on these things with your host, Lyndia Grant.